So I have to start with a definition of utopia and how I think about utopia. So I think, first of all, I think about it historically, that to me, utopian thinking is a kind of modernist project with regard to our present case, is present day. What I mean by that is, I think, for example, within within Marxism, for example, there was an image of a utopian society, the way things should be, and that all plans, for that future, the state would be engaged in making plans for that future kind of utopian, when the state itself could wither away or whatever it was. But the idea is that everything we do today is justified in some sense to put in place the utopian plan of the future. So we're more focused in some sense on that plan rather than the responding to particular needs that come up today. So that's a danger that everybody recognized after, in the socialist countries, that the relationship between the present design of society, how to enact that, and the utopian vision was a problem. It was a problem to be engaged in thinking teleologically about moving forward towards a utopia. And I think that discovery, in a sense, for the social realm makes a lot of sense. And I think that what we refer, so that was a very modernist project for the state to be moving towards a kind of utopian. The postmodern relationship between the state or governance and utopia is a lot different. It basically understands that maybe you work with some design principles, but they have to be flexible, because you're going to be learning on the ground as things come up, and you need to be able to respond to that. So the whole idea of envisioning a future and then moving towards that is, again, as I said, it's a more modernist one. And so I tend to think about use of utopian images today differently than, say, social scientists or activists of the Marxist project did with utopia. So that said, part of the activist project that I work on has to do with the commons. And so I do envision something called the commons, which is to say, I envision that there's a sector of the society that is different than the market or government sector. It's called the commons sector. But is that a utopian image? And the answer is no, it's not. And I think that those of us who are working with this idea of a commons, which is different than communism, which was a particular utopian vision for society, the commons is really not that project. It's not part of that modernist project. And so one of the ways in which you ensure that that mistake is not going to happen, the idea that that all the world and world history is converging into some idea of a utopian society, is that from a commons perspective, you look anthropologically at collective forms of social organization where property is shared or managed collectively and distributed more equitably. You look in different cultures for examples of that. And you know that you don't just reproduce those in your own culture, but you look at them as analogies or something like that, that how could they help me think about that problem here. So that's very different than taking that example, taking that other society's practice and making it into a utopian form that you're going to try to emulate. So that would be the kind of biggest distinction. Then I think that responses to problems that we have, like for example with regard to the food system, since we have a food system in this country and now globally that has to do with industrial agriculture, I think about the dismantling of that and more equitable practices within that. And I don't try to think of a utopian vision for what pre-World War II, pre-industrial agriculture farming practices were, because I think there's a place for technology, various other things in deindustrializing agriculture. So again, there's not really a place for utopian thinking there, but you do see that all over. You do see a romanticization, almost a nostalgia for what industrial ag has destroyed, this kind of imperialist nostalgia. And that nostalgia tends to make a utopian moment even out of the former practices, such that you even see, I know there's a billboard I saw that looks more closely, it's by Monsanto, but as you're driving down 35W, I don't know if you guys have seen this, it says something like, the communities are, can't remember, but there's a picture of the kind of old school farmer, the kind of, you know, pre-World War II farm behind him. And it's something about farmers make communities, and communities make farms, or something like that. And then it's by Monsanto. So the idea is that you can use this utopian vision then of what the farm used to be like, and it becomes just a branding or a kind of false advertising, and more useful. The nostalgia involved is more useful to contemporary marketers who are producing something not at all like that. Okay, so what have I said about utopian things here? I haven't really had a very interesting, or not interesting, but I haven't had a really positive thing to say. But I don't know if you guys, have you looked at the utopian work of the geographer David Harvey? He's a Marxist who's a geographer and works in Baltimore. And he says there still is a place for utopian projects, for city planners like himself. And that, so he does give, here's a model of what I think a more just and equal society would look like in Baltimore. He provides that and talks about in an interesting way that, you know, that we shouldn't be just completely getting rid of the utopian vision as part of our design, as a design exercise for when we plan cities. And I agree that there are principles, you know, that one can design to, which is a little bit different than the idea of a utopia, because for me the idea of utopia is a kind of, is a story that contains everything it needs for a just society, and it assumes that those who are designing it can speak for lots of the diversity in a society. So there are so many dangers about that, having one voice or one vision speak for the kind of diversity that we live in cities today, that becomes dangerous.